What if I told you that heaven stopped for you? Not when you were singing boldly, or standing in strength, or celebrating victories, but in the moment no one saw. That exact second when you could have collapsed, broken, or cursed the silence. And instead, you chose to whisper, "Thank you," through clenched teeth and tear-stained eyes. It wasn't loud. It wasn't noticed, but it was holy. And heaven heard it. There's a kind of worship the world will never understand. A song with no melody, a prayer without volume, a sacrifice born not from joy, but from agony. This is the praise that doesn't echo in churches or go viral on platforms. It rises from battlefields no one sees, from hospital rooms, lonely nights, unanswered prayers. It's the kind of worship that doesn't wait for breakthrough, it creates it. You didn't know that when you whispered, "You are still good." In the silence, the angel stood still. That when your strength had vanished and all that was left was surrender, something eternal took notice. That what you offered, through pain and confusion, was a weapon no force of darkness could replicate or stop. So why did it feel like nothing changed? Why did it seem like heaven was quiet even when you gave everything? Because what you offered wasn't casual, it was rare. And rare offerings are never wasted, they are hidden for a divine appointment. And today, that appointment begins. If you stay with me until the end of this message, you'll understand why your silent praise triggered a movement in the spirit realm. Why the thing you gave in the dark, the obedience, the gratitude, the worship with no reward, is about to return to you in glory. And not just as a gift, but as a revelation. You'll see why this wasn't a delay. It was divine preparation. And I say this not from a platform of perfection, but from the same ashes you've walked through. I've worshiped with no voice. I've bowed with no answer. I've whispered hope when all I felt was absence. And I'm telling you, that kind of faith shakes heaven. That kind of fire doesn't consume, it refines. And if even a single line of this has already awakened something in you, then I'm inviting you to walk this journey deeper with us. We are building a space where voices like yours, voices that praise in the fire, can rise together. Our mission is to reach 1,000 chosen ones who carry this same fire. And you are one of them. So subscribe now, not just to support a channel, but to answer a calling. The next revelations will go even deeper, and you won't want to miss the moment your story becomes the key to someone else's freedom. Shall we begin? No one saw the moment your spirit trembled, but still reached upward. No one heard the silent hallelujah rising from the ashes of your disappointment. The world kept moving, unaware, uninterested, but something eternal paused. Heaven held its breath, because there is a kind of praise that cannot be heard by ears, only by spirit. A kind of worship that doesn't begin with joy, but with brokenness. And that is the kind that changes everything. When you were at your lowest, when no light appeared on the horizon, and still you whispered, "You are good." You weren't just speaking into the dark. You were shaking the unseen. You were offering something rare, a sound born not from comfort, but from courage. A sound that hell cannot counterfeit. A sound that only chosen ones release when all is stripped away and only faith remains. That sound reached the throne. God saw it. He saw the trembling hands raised without applause, the whispered prayers spoken through tears, the breath you gave to worship when you had none left. And it mattered. Not just emotionally, it mattered spiritually. Because worship like that becomes incense. Not the kind burned by ritual, but the kind crushed out of pain, crushed in silence, crushed in surrender. And from that crushing came a fragrance heaven could not ignore. You didn't realize it then, but every tear, every breath of trust, every defiant "thank you" became an offering. A light in a realm no eye can see. You built an altar, not with wood and fire, but with your yes in the dark. You hosted God in your weakness. And the weight of that kind of offering is eternal. It doesn't vanish. It lingers. It calls forth movement. It invites reward. You thought no one heard. But heaven heard. And what you offered in the dark is now preparing to be answered in the light. If your spirit knows this kind of worship, the kind given with no audience but God, write in the comments, "Heaven heard me." Let your altar echo. Let your faith leave a mark. You didn't offer perfection. You offered presence. You didn't raise your hands because everything was right. You raised them because your soul refused to bow to anything but truth. And in that moment, you stepped into something few ever enter. Worship forged in fire, not rehearsed, not performative, but born from the battlefield of inner silence, where pain meets persistence and surrender becomes a song. This kind of worship doesn't come from stages. It's not projected on screens. It's not captured in melodies or choruses. It rises quietly from the cracked places in your spirit, from the nights when your strength collapsed and all you could do was breathe His name. That breath became incense, not the sweet kind prepared by tradition, but the kind crushed from truth. And that crushing released a fragrance no enemy could touch. No demon could counterfeit, because it didn't come from your lips. It came from your surrender. Heaven collects that incense. Every time you knelt in exhaustion, every time you whispered, "Still, I believe," a fragrance rose. Not crafted from certainty, but from sacrifice, and it didn't disappear. It entered the throne room. It filled the atmosphere of the invisible. It caused angels to halt and the heart of God to lean closer. Because the kind of trust you carried, raw, unpolished, stripped of answers, is the rarest oil in the universe. You thought you were alone in your breaking, that your trembling faith didn't reach far, but it did. And the proof is this: you're still standing, not because you were untouched by fire, but because the fire refined you. Because what was burning was not your faith, but your flesh, not your hope, but your fear. And what remained after the flames was holy doc. The praise that costs nothing may sound loud, but the praise that costs everything speaks louder in heaven. And now, something sacred is being released. Not because you fought your way through, but because you surrendered your way through. Because your silence carried obedience. Because your breaking became an offering. And that offering has opened a realm, one that can only be accessed by those who didn't just sing about trust, but lived it. Now, the fire that once seemed cruel has revealed its secret. It wasn't sent to punish you. It was sent to perfume you. And the world is about to smell what heaven already sees. While the world around you remained still, something fierce was happening in the spirit. You didn't see swords. You didn't hear thunder. But a war raged, not around you, but within you. And in that war, the battlefield wasn't your situation. It was your soul. The enemy wasn't your circumstance. It was the invitation to give up, to curse, to collapse. But you didn't. You stood, not with force, but with faith. When you chose to worship through exhaustion. When you whispered, "God, I trust you," even when nothing made sense. When you let your tears fall but refused to let your worship die, that was war. And you won, because worship is not weakness, it is warfare. And yours was not a melody, it was a weapon. A declaration that hell could not silence. A banner that said, "I belong to God." And the moment you lifted it, not in comfort, but in chaos, the atmosphere shifted. Chains unseen by human eyes began to break. Accusations in the spirit lost their ground. And every lie the enemy built around your identity began to crumble. Your worship didn't just soothe your pain, it wounded darkness. It exposed every fear. It silenced every whisper of shame. It reminded the unseen realm of something it hoped you'd forget. You are marked. You are sealed. You are chosen, and chosen ones don't worship for applause. They worship because they know who they are, even when everything around them tries to tell them otherwise. They sing not because of what they see, but because of what they carry. And what you carry is not ordinary. It is fire-tested faith, silent strength, sacred defiance. So the next time it feels like nothing's changing, remember, everything already did. The real war was never external. It was always about allegiance. And your allegiance has already been made clear by every whispered yes you gave in the fire. But what if that fire didn't just reveal your identity, but unlocked a legacy? Stay with me. We're just stepping into what your worship activated. They didn't hear you, but the prison did. While people remained silent and your surroundings gave you no sign of relief, the chains around your spirit began to tremble. Because the sound of true worship doesn't move crowds. It moves strongholds. You didn't need loud music or recognition. You only needed one sacred decision, to worship anyway. You've read about Paul and Silas, bruised, shackled, forgotten. In a prison, no stage, no audience. Just darkness and the echo of their chains. But what did they do? They sang, not because they had been freed, but because they knew who was with them in the prison. And as they lifted that sound, not of victory, but of trust, the earth shook. Doors opened. Chains fell. This wasn't a myth. It was a spiritual blueprint. And whether you knew it or not, you followed it. Because your chains, the ones no one saw, the doubts you hid, the fears that haunted your silence, they heard your worship. They heard your defiance. They heard you say, "I still believe," when you had every reason to give up. And that sound has power. It's not about volume. It's about vibration. It's not about performance. It's about presence. And when you chose presence over panic, praise over pressure, something ancient began to move. The walls around you cracked. The prison inside you weakened. Because the truth is this, your faith echoed. Not just through your room, but through the realms. It became a key. Not just for you, but for others. You've been wondering why your battle felt so intense. Why your warfare seemed prolonged. It's because your breakthrough wasn't just yours. It was prophetic. It wasn't just your prison being challenged. It was a generation's. Your sound is a sound of liberation. And the same doors that began to open for you will swing wide for others through your testimony. So let the chains know. You praised anyway. And if you've ever felt your prison shift, not because of a miracle, but because of your worship, write in the comments. My chains heard me. Let heaven mark your boldness. Let others know. Freedom still echoes through faith. You thought your praise was personal. You thought the pain you endured was isolated, that the prison you worshiped through was yours alone. But in heaven's architecture, obedience never stops at the individual. Every act of trust, every midnight surrender, every whispered, "I still believe," became more than survival. It became strategy. And your worship became a doorway. Because when you praised, the chains didn't just fall from your spirit. They began to loosen around others too. Your voice carried an unseen frequency, tuned not just to release yourself, but to disturb the atmosphere for everyone still trapped in silent cells of despair. Without knowing it, your cry in the dark became a map for someone else's deliverance. You were bleeding, but blazing a trail. There are people right now walking through fires they don't understand, battles of depression, loneliness, temptation, silence. They think they're alone. They think no one has felt what they feel. But what they don't know is, your praise has already been there. Your testimony, though hidden, has already opened a realm where their chains begin to loosen. Because worship doesn't echo for applause, it echoes for alignment. It sends out coordinates in the spirit. There's a way out. This is why your warfare was never just warfare. It was intercession. It was divine permission to unlock others. That prison you walked through was not only for your transformation, it was a portal of generational freedom. You praised not just for yourself, but for those who didn't yet know how to. And now, They're beginning to feel something shift. They don't know why. They don't know who. But something inside them is responding because you praised. God never wastes pain. He plants it. And what he planted through you, in the dark, in the silence, in the trench, is now breaking through the surface. Your scars are speaking. Your past fire is guiding. And those who thought they were lost forever are beginning to find their way, not through theology, not through noise, but through the trail of someone who chose worship when everything said, give up. You've become a living intercession, a voice that others are beginning to follow, not because you're perfect, but because you're real, because you bled in silence and still built an altar. And now the smoke from that altar is visible in the heavens, and in the hearts of those still searching. So when you wonder if it was worth it, remember this. You didn't just praise to be free. You praised to become the way, and the way is opening. You kept waiting for someone to notice, for a door to open, for a hand to reach back, but all you heard was silence. No one clapped when you forgave. No one celebrated when you kept going. No one saw the nights you cried in secret after helping everyone else. It felt like your love was invisible, your sacrifice forgotten, your loyalty wasted. But while earth said nothing, heaven was on its feet, because in the kingdom, applause doesn't come from people. It comes from presence. Heaven doesn't cheer for the loud. It moves for the faithful. And while others dismissed you as soft, naive, or even delusional, heaven saw a warrior. Heaven recorded every silent yes, every act of honor no one thanked you for, every time you chose reverence instead of revenge. And while the world was measuring outcomes, heaven was measuring obedience. The truth is, you didn't need to be seen to be sacred. You didn't need validation to carry value. Because God saw what others missed: consistency, purity, relentless surrender. And that's why your worship became weighty, not because of how loud it was, but because of how deep it came from. Every whispered prayer, every trembling declaration, every time you lifted your hands while holding your heartbreak, it was noted, it was preserved, and it is now being transformed into a reward the world won't understand, but it won't be able to ignore. And here's the mystery: you were never invisible. You were hidden, not hidden because you weren't worthy, hidden because you were holy, hidden not to be forgotten, but to be preserved. Because when heaven celebrates someone in secret, it's only a matter of time before that glory becomes public. But not for pride, for purpose. The earth may have stayed silent, but heaven stood, applauding. And what if that hidden celebration was just the beginning of your unveiling? Let's step into the fire, not to burn, but to rise. You thought the fire would break you, the pressure, the waiting, the abandonment. It felt like too much, as if your soul was unraveling thread by thread in the heat of delay. But here's what no one told you: the fire was never your enemy. It was your initiation. The burning didn't come to destroy you. It came to reveal you, because gold is not made in calm places. It is revealed in the furnace, where everything fake melts, where everything temporary fades, where everything that cannot last is forced to fall away. And in that sacred intensity, where you cried without answers, obeyed without applause, trusted without signs, something immortal began to form. You didn't just survive that season. You were changed by it. Your worship grew deeper. Your hearing became clearer. Your heart became lighter. The old version of you, the one that depended on comfort, expected instant results, lived for recognition, could not come through this fire. Only what was eternal could remain. And it did. That is why now your presence feels different. Your voice has weight. Not because of volume, but because of history. The spiritual kind. You carry something that wasn't taught. It was carved. Every scar on your spirit became a seal. Every moment you chose faith instead of fear, praise instead of panic, intimacy instead of isolation, It all built something invisible and unstoppable. The enemy hoped you would come out bitter, angry, distrustful, but you came out bolder, clearer, refined, because fire in the hands of God is not punishment, it's preparation. And he was preparing oil, the kind of oil that only flows from crushed places, the kind of oil that cannot be stolen, imitated, or mass-produced. And now, that oil is resting on you. The pain was the process. The fire was the forge. But the result is glory. And that glory is rising, not outside first, but within. Something sacred is beginning to awaken in your spirit. The kind of awakening that doesn't need noise, only permission. And now that you've walked through the fire, are you ready to build something eternal? Not all altars are built with hands. Some are raised in silence, formed not with stone or wood, but with the surrender of a heart that refused to quit. Every time you worshipped without words, believed without sight, or knelt in a room where no one heard your cry, you were building something. A sanctuary invisible to human eyes, but glowing in the spiritual realm. And now, God is stepping into it. You didn't know it, but those moments you thought were wasted were actually sacred. That night you couldn't sleep because your spirit was aching. It was an offering. That hour you turned off the noise just to whisper, "I still trust you." It was incense. And the times you didn't understand, didn't feel, didn't see, but still obeyed, those were stones, stones of fire, laid one by one until the altar stood. And this altar is not for men to admire. It's not a monument, it's a dwelling place for glory, for visitation, for presence. God doesn't choose the most decorated temples. He chooses the most surrendered souls. And yours has become a throne room. You weren't being ignored. You were being engraved. Each delay was shaping something eternal. Each heartbreak was hollowing out space for more of him. Every moment of silence wasn't a punishment. It was preparation. Because when the time comes, that altar will burn. Not with effort, but with encounter. That's why the warfare increased. That's why the pruning felt ruthless. That's why your name was buried. Because heaven was building something in secret that hell could not touch. And now, that altar is ready. Not for performance, but for presence. Not for noise, but for glory. Not for visitation, but habitation. So stand still. Feel the weight of it. Not of pain, but of promise. Something sacred is descending, not just around you, but into you. Let's now bring this journey to a close, not as an ending, but as a revelation. Because what's rising from this altar will never fade. You thought this was just another message, but your spirit knows better. Something ancient has stirred within you. Because what you endured was not for destruction. It was for definition. The fire did not ruin you, it refined you. And now you no longer carry the weight of unanswered prayers. You carry the oil that only suffering can produce. There's a fragrance on you now, not of fear, but of having been forged. Of having trusted through shadows, sung through silence, believed while breaking. That kind of history cannot be faked. It becomes a fragrance in the unseen realm, a vibration that heaven responds to. And you, beloved one, carry it now. Become the altar, the living place of communion. You've become the torch, not lit by applause or recognition, but by intimacy, by obedience, by faith that bled, but never abandoned its source. And because of that, heaven is responding. The silence you once mistook for divine absence was actually the sound of heaven gathering oil. Every tear, bottled. Every whisper, echoed. Every surrender, engraved. And now the pouring begins. Not just blessings, but presence. Not just restoration, but revelation. This is your moment. Not to perform, not to explain, but to remain. To host what has chosen you. And what has chosen you is holy. If your soul felt this truth, Write in the comments, "I built my altar in silence." Let that be your seal. Let that be your declaration. In the Spirit, a banner the invisible world can see and angels can respond to. And if this word ignited something inside you, subscribe now. Our sacred mission is to reach 1,000 true ones, not just with content, but with calling. Because the next revelation may not just speak to your pain. It may unlock your destiny. We are not finished, you are not forgotten, and the Spirit is not done speaking. We'll meet again in the next divine calling.